So imagine this. It is June 2011. We are in Tomsk, Siberia.
Right. A university town known for its wooden architecture. It's the kind of place that usually stays out of the international spotlight.
Exactly. But inside a district courtroom, a local prosecutor, Viktor Fyodorov, is filing a case that is about to spiral into a geopolitical nightmare.
And it's not going after a terrorist cell or an arms dealer.
No, he is trying to ban a book. And he wants this book placed on the Russian federal list of extremist materials.
And we have to be clear about what that list means. It isn't just a do not read recommendation.
Not at all.
Being on that list puts a book in the same legal category as Mein Kampf. It becomes illegal to print, to distribute, even to possess.
Yeah.
It basically erases the text from society.
Right. So you'd expect this book to be, I don't know, a manual on how to build dirty bombs or some manifesto calling for violent revolution.
Of course.
But it wasn't. The book in the dock was Bhagavad Gita as it is.
A translation and commentary of the ancient Hindu scripture, specifically the one written in the 1960s by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Which just sets up this incredibly bizarre picture. You have a text that is as sacred to hundreds of millions, studied by people like Einstein, Gandhi, Oppenheimer, and it's suddenly being dissected by a municipal prosecutor in Siberia who's arguing it ferments social discord.
So that's the mission of this deep dive. We were looking at the trial of the Gita. It's a story about what happens when modern sort of bureaucratic anti-extremism laws collide with ancient spiritual philosophy.
And it involves confused experts, a box of canned beef, which is a whole other story.
Oh, we have to get to that.
And a diplomatic crisis that nearly derailed the entire relationship between India and Russia.
It really is the ultimate case study in context. The core question was, if you take ancient metaphors literally and strip them of their history, do they become crimes?
And does a local court in Tomsk even have the jurisdiction to judge a 5,000-year-old scripture? So let's dig into the prosecution's argument. I was reading through the initial filing, and Prosecutor Fyodorov wasn't just acting on a whim. He was using a specific law, Federal Law Number 114 FC, on countering extremist activities.
And he had backup. He relied on an expert analysis that was commissioned by the FSB, the Federal Security Service,
Right.
and conducted by 3 professors from Tomsk State University.
And this is where we need to look at the Russian context, right? Because Russia has these incredibly strict laws against extremism.
They do, and it's largely born out of very real fears of terrorism and separatism. But there's also a cultural dimension. I mean, since the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russian Orthodox Church has really reasserted itself as a kind of moral guardian.
So there's this suspicion of new or foreign religious movements?
A deep suspicion of what they sometimes call totalitarian sects. So ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, was already viewed with, well, a lot of skepticism by certain authorities.
But here's the thing that confused me at first. The prosecutors, and later even the Russian Foreign Ministry, they kept insisting they weren't banning the Bhagavad Gita itself.
Right, they kept saying, we love the Gita, it's a world treasure.
Exactly. They claimed they were specifically banning Prabhupada's version, Bhagavad Gita as it is. They argued the translation had semantic distortions and that the commentary was the real problem.
And that was their legal loophole. I mean, they knew they couldn't put Lord Krishna on trial without looking completely insane.
So they targeted the commentary.
They targeted the commentary. And Prabhupada's commentary is known for being very direct, very uncompromising. He writes from a specific theological tradition. And the experts in Tomsk claimed this commentary contained signs of fomenting religious hatred.
Okay, so I want to push on that for a second. Playing devil's advocate here, I looked at the specific words they flagged. The commentary does use terms like fools, rascals, enemies, and demons to describe people who aren't devotees.
It does.
So if I stood on a street corner today and called everyone who didn't agree with me a demon, wouldn't that be seen as hate speech? Why were the prosecutors wrong to flag that?
It's a valid question if you're looking at it through a purely secular modern lens. But context is everything. In the context of the scripture, a demon or an asura isn't a racial slur. It's not a call to violence. It's a theological category. It refers to a state of consciousness, someone who is materialistic or, opposed to the divine order.
So when Prabhupada calls someone a fool, he's not trying to start a fight.
No, he's engaging in a philosophical argument about the nature of the soul versus the body. The prosecution was basically doing a keyword search. They saw enemy, they saw fool, and they just hit the red button, completely ignoring that religious texts are full of that kind of binary language.
It's the exclusivity trap.
Exactly. They argued that by claiming the Krishna religion was the supreme path, the text was insulting other religions. But if you ban a religious text for claiming to be the truth, you have to ban almost every major religious text in history. Monotheism is, by definition, exclusive.
It reminds me of that saying, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If your job is to find extremism, well, you're going to find it in the intense rhetoric of a spiritual teacher.
So the trial kicks off in June 2011, but the real drama happens in August.
And we need to talk about the judge, Galina Butenko, because she seems to be the only person in the room who actually, read the book.
Judge Butenko was fascinating. She presided over the hearings, and she was clearly skeptical of the prosecution's whole word search approach from the start.
She famously quoted the Bible, didn't she?
She did. It was a brilliant move. She brought up the phrase, "Don't throw pearls before swine." She was essentially asking, if the Bible calls people swine to make a point about spiritual receptivity, are we going to ban the Bible too? She was forcing them to confront the absurdity of their own logic.
And the prosecution's own experts completely fell apart.
Oh, they crumbled. When they were questioned in court, they backpedaled so fast they admitted their opinion. The entire foundation of the lawsuit should be considered private rather than official. They realized they were way out of their depth.
But the prosecution didn't drop it. They doubled down. They asked for a new assessment from a different university.
Right, from Kemerovo. So the court paused. And this delay is what turned a local annoyance into this massive international incident. Because while the court was waiting, the timeline drags into December 2011.
And that is when India wakes up.
And when India woke up, it was explosive. You have to remember, the Bhagavad Gita isn't just a book in India. It's the cultural soul of the nation. The news broke on December 17th, and within 48 hours, it was the only thing anyone was talking about.
The outline mentions a golden day in the Indian parliament. That sounds poetic, but reading the notes, it just sounds like absolute chaos.
It was chaos, but it was unified chaos.
Yeah.
That's why a member of the upper house called it a golden day. In Indian politics, the parties almost never agree on anything.
Right.
But on December 19th, the Lok Sabha, the lower house, was just paralyzed. The speaker had to adjourn the session because MPs from all sides were shouting, "We will not tolerate an insult to Lord Krishna."
And it wasn't just shouting. The political pressure was intense. Sushma Swaraj, who was the opposition leader then, she demanded the Gita be declared a national book.
You had MPs asking these grand rhetorical questions like, can you ban the sun? Can you ban the Himalayas? It was pure political theater, but it worked.
The Indian government was feeling the heat.
They were getting hammered. The Prime Minister's office, the Foreign Minister, they were being accused of sleeping at the wheel. Apparently, ISK Khan had warned them back in November, but the diplomats just thought it would blow over.
And it wasn't just hurt feelings. This was threatening trade. Russia and India have massive ties.
Huge ties. Nuclear power plants, defense contracts for fighter jets. All of this was suddenly in the background of a conversation about a book ban. You had the VHP, a major Hindu organization, threatening to boycott Russian goods. Protests outside Russian consulates.
And this is where the story gets a little ugly. We saw reports of Russian flags being burned by some right-wing groups. But then the counter-protest in Russia. We have to talk about the canned beef incident.
This is one of those details that's just so revealing. It exposes the cultural illiteracy at play. So seeing these protests in India, some Orthodox activists in Moscow decide to retaliate against the local ISK Khan temple.
Okay.
Now, anyone who knows anything about Hare Krishnas knows they are strict vegetarians.
Yeah.
It is a core tenet of their faith. The cow is sacred.
Right. Of course.
So these activists, along with an Islamic leader, a mufti, they proposed sending humanitarian aid to the starving Krishna devotees, and that aid was canned beef.
Wow. And the Mufti specifically mentioned nutritious halal canned beef.
It was a calculated insult on multiple levels. It was a way of saying, we don't respect your beliefs, we don't respect your culture, and we see you as pitiable. It wasn't a prank. It was a demonstration of dominance.
It just highlights the hostility they were facing. It wasn't just a legal argument.
No, it was a cultural rejection. And amidst all this, flags burning in Mumbai, beef being brandished in Moscow, the Russian diplomats were absolutely panicking.
They must have been looking at Tomsk and just thinking, what are you people doing?
Oh, they were furious. Alexander Kadakin, the Russian ambassador to India, he was a career diplomat who loved India. He did not mince words. He publicly called the instigators of the trial madmen.
He actually used the word madmen.
He did. He said their madness should be stopped. He called the Gita a source of wisdom for the world. He was desperately trying to signal to India that this prosecutor in Tomsk did not represent the Kremlin.
And the Russian intellectual community stepped up too.
Yes, the scholars were horrified. Yevgenia Vanina from the Institute of Oriental Studies wrote this scathing critique. She pointed out that the Gita was first translated into Russian in 1788.
Under Catherine the Great.
Yes, it was fine then. But now, in the 21st century, it's extremist. She said if you use the prosecutor's primitive screening method, you'd have to ban the Quran, the Bible, most of Greek mythology.
Another scholar, Andrei Volodin, said something that really stuck with me. He said even the CIA couldn't have planned a more effective sabotage of Russia-India relations.
It's the butterfly effect of bureaucracy. A small paperwork filing in Siberia causes a political hurricane in New Delhi.
So let's bring it back to the courtroom. It's late December 2011. The world is watching. The second expert panel comes back, and they're split. Judge Butenko has to make a call.
And on December 28, she did. She dismissed the case. She ruled that the prosecutor had failed to prove the book was extremist.
And her reasoning was really important, wasn't it? It wasn't just a technicality.
No, it was a crucial distinction. She ruled that propaganda of exclusiveness, saying, "My God is the best God," and criticizing other beliefs is not the same as extremism.
Right.
For something to be extremist under the law, there must be calls for extremist actions. You have to be telling people to go out and commit violence. Merely calling someone a fool is not criminal speech.
A huge victory for common sense. But Prosecutor Fyodorov didn't give up. He appealed.
He was relentless. He appealed in January 2012. And this is when the heavy hitters in Russia finally said, enough.
The open letter.
Yes, in March 2012, 20 leading Russian philosophers and philologists wrote an open letter directly to President Medvedev and Prime Minister Putin. They basically said, this trial is discrediting Russia. We look like barbarians. Please stop this.
And it worked. On March 21st, the appeal court upheld the original decision. By May, the prosecutor finally gave up. The book was safe.
The legal battle was over. But the story doesn't actually end there. If you want to understand who really won, you have to flash forward.
Yes, the coda to this story is just perfect. We're talking about December 4, 2025.
Right, more than a decade after the trial. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is meeting with President Vladimir Putin. High-level summit, and as a diplomatic gift, Modi hands Putin a book.
And it wasn't just any book.
It was a Russian copy of Bhagavad Gita, as it is. The exact same translation, the exact same commentary that a Russian prosecutor tried to ban as extremist material.
That is such a power move.
It's the ultimate validation. Here is the president of Russia accepting the banned book as a symbol of wisdom from the Prime Minister of India. It completely erased the stigma. It cemented the idea that the trial in Tomsk was an aberration, a mistake.
It brings the whole story full circle, from the threat of being banned and burned to being exchanged by heads of state. So when we step back from this whole deep dive, what are we really learning here? I mean, on one hand, it's a story about one specific book, but on the other, it feels like a warning.
I think the main takeaway is the danger of, I don't know, what I'd call bureaucratic literalism. The Russian law was designed to stop terrorists. It was a blunt instrument. And when you take a blunt instrument and try to perform surgery on a complex, ancient spiritual tradition, you just make a mess.
It's about cultural literacy. The prosecutors saw the word enemy and thought hate crime. They just didn't have the context to understand spiritual enemy.
Precisely. And it also highlights the resilience of these texts. The Gita survived thousands of years. It survived British colonialism, Soviet atheism, and it survived the District Court of Tomsk. It suggests these ideas are almost anti-fragile. The more you attack them, the stronger they seem to get.
And the stronger the community rallies around them. I doubt the Indian parliament would have been so united about the Gita if it hadn't been under attack.
Absolutely. The ban attempt actually popularized the book in Russia. Sales went up. Curiosity went up. The prosecutor achieved the exact opposite of what he wanted.
The Streisand effect in full force.
100%.
So here's a thought to leave you with. We spent this episode kind of laughing at the prosecutor in 2011 who used a keyword search to find extremism. We think of that as primitive. But here we are in 2026. How do we moderate content on the internet today?
We use AI. We use algorithms.
And what do those algorithms do? They strip away context. They look for bad words. They flag harmful content based on patterns, often ignoring nuance, satire, or history.
That is a very uncomfortable parallel.
Isn't it? If we fed the Iliad or Shakespeare or the Bible into a modern content moderation bot today without any special protection, how many of them would be flagged for violence or misogyny or hate speech? In a way, we are all Viktor Fyodotov now. We've just automated the process.
That is a terrifying thought. Maybe the trial of the Gita wasn't a relic of the past. Maybe it was a preview of the future.
Something to mull over. That's it for this deep dive into the trial of the Gita. Thanks for listening and stay curious.